Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those places at Hawk Blogger. And it is the day before the day, and it's also the day after the many days, as it's already been an eventful Seahawks offseason. Free agency begins tomorrow. I wouldn't be shocked if we start hearing about rumored deals starting to leak out at some point today. There's already big news. Myles Garrett was just signed to a massive extension, $40 million per year. So anyone that thought that maybe he would be part of the Seahawks future, that is no longer the case. And with us to talk about all of it, one of our favorite guests, Griff Sturgeon of Seattle Overload Podcast. You can find him at C Mikes, that's two S's, Spin Move on Twitter. And Griff, the first thing I got to ask, are you gonna change to some sort of Raiders related player for your handle, or you a C Mike
Yeah.
forever?
Well, no, the C Mike Spin Move handle is I won't let the open field spin move of Kristen Michael ever fade from the collective memory. That needs to be that needs to always be at top of mind. I like to think that if anyone sees one of my tweets, they immediately think of Kristen Michael from 10 years ago. That's just kind of my trying to incept you into forcing that into your brain. No, I mean the Raiders will be fun to watch. They'll be kind of like a fun pet team in the AFC. See what's going on there. The AFC is really tough, so I feel like they're walking into a buzzsaw, but like all the personalities in that building are geared up for that. Tom Brady, Spy Tech, Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly. I mean, that's a lot of combination of confidence and I think maybe the right kind of ego in Geno Smith, who has a big ego, but in a way that's earned. So that will be a really fun team to watch. But I'm still a Seahawks fan. Not to worry.
I'm just hassling you. I think it's actually good news that there's a team that's worth being interested in that's not a Seahawks team. I found the NFL in general to be less watchable the last few years, and having a team like the Lions that I really love to watch this year, having a few other teams that you kind of root for or want to see. I mean, they're not your team. You're not going to have the same passion, but
Right.
I think there's going to be a lot of people with their eyes on what's going on in Las Vegas. And honestly, I think that's good for the NFL. I mean, you were way too young to remember when the Raiders were good, but you know, uh, there was a time when the Raiders were the team that people didn't want to play, and they were rough and tumble and um, explosive plays and all this kind of stuff. And they've just been. You said they're walking into a buzzsaw. They've been in that for
Yeah.
for 30 years essentially without a weapon of their own. So, it's nice to see that kind of coming together, and I'm really really curious. I think people look at the Justin Herbert and Geno Smith comparisons and they're like, well, Justin Herbert's clearly better than Geno Smith. And I'm
Mhm.
not here to get in that debate, but there's a pretty good amount of statistical evidence that there's not as much of a difference between those two quarterbacks as at least the general league perception is. And so I'll be interested to see how those two go up against each other, Bo Nix and obviously Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. A crazy division quarterback wise. I mean, I feel like 80% of the top 12 quarterbacks are in the AFC right now. So, give or take. Yeah.
And how did that go for them in terms of winning a ring this year? Didn't happen.
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's crazy with how good Josh Allen are, Lamar Jackson. It just doesn't matter with Mahomes. I mean, that was the year. If ever there was a year to get over that Mahomes mountaintop, I mean, they fail. The one time Burrow does it, they lose in the big game
Yeah.
as well, right? So
Well, the one time Burrow does it, he gifted a ring to the Rams. I don't think the Rams would have one without Burrow winning.
yeah.
Without if either Allen or Mahomes were in that game against the Rams, I think they win it. So I will always believe that. But Griff, obviously the big news that people are still reeling from, and I know you are as well, is the Geno Smith trade. And while there was some rumblings about the DK thing and that there might be some smoke, the Geno thing seemed to come out of nowhere. What was your reaction when you heard?
I was shocked. I did not think this was going to happen this offseason. If at any, it's easy to take the big step back. 34, soon to be 35-year-old quarterback. He's due for an extension. It's not like on its face a wild event. If you had told any of us at any point the past 2 or 3 years, like, hey, Geno eventually might be traded, even if you don't want that to happen or you agree or disagree with it, I don't think anyone would be like, they would trade Geno. Like, it's just, the nature of the NFL, and contracts and business and everything, and the whole notion of long-term versus short-term, like on its face, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I admit, though, that at any point to trade him, this felt like the least likely instance of when it would happen. And, if in 2 years they find their quarterback of the future or whatever, and they're winning 13 games, no one's going to care about that, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a Super Bowl, right? Or competing for one. But yeah, I guess my immediate response was shock, because even with I went into the offseason with thinking like, I don't know what will happen with DK, but I went into the offseason with Geno thinking like, yeah, Geno will be on the team at least for 2025,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, right? I wonder if John knew that. I wonder what John really felt he knew or didn't know headed into this offseason. But yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I feel like is going to constantly be misinterpreted about this offseason. I want to get into this with you as well, because what's going to happen this offseason one way or another is going to be a referendum on John Schneider. Either he makes a series of moves that work out for the best, or this could absolutely blow up and the team goes the opposite direction. But in order to do that, you kind of have to have a point of view on what are the decisions that he made and what are the decisions that were made for him. And, on this move, there's people like, oh, yeah, he's making the decision to move on from an old quarterback and get younger and clear cap space and all this kind of stuff. Did he make that decision? Is that your impression, that this was a John Schneider decision to do that? Or did Geno Smith make that decision for him?
That's a good point. And the way Schultz and I think Condotta have worded it, it sounds like there was the early stages of the negotiation. Geno's camp got a number, and it sounds like they didn't come back to the table, and their response to that initial offer was trade me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's true, verbatim, word for word, that makes you wonder, like, what was really going on there? Was Geno insulted? Did Geno was he pivoting to wanting out? Was all of the verbiage McDonald and Schneider have been using in their press conferences and at the combine, was that to woo Geno back? Did they think Geno might want out? Like, oh, Pete Carroll in Vegas. Like, it almost seemed too obvious, the Pete Carroll Vegas thing, that I kind of dismissed it in my mind. But maybe it was always headed that way, and people, only Pete and Geno really knew that. I don't know. It would be speculation, but
there's a couple things, and Bob Condotta, I think, has pretty quietly been reporting some things that are very different than what was nationally reported. So the national report was Albert Breer, had said that the Seahawks offered around $35 million a year. Bob Condotta, on consecutive days, and I'll read to you directly from his article this morning, said the team wanted to keep Smith and gave him what it felt was a fair offer as an extension to current contract. While reports vary, one person with knowledge of the situation said the offer was a 2-year deal in the $40 to $45 million range.
Oh, wow.
Similar to that of Matt Stafford, who has a 4-year, $160 million deal in LA. This would have kept Smith under contract until the 2027 season. The team made the offer early in the week, hoping to wrap things up by the end of the week. Seattle instead is said to have gotten no counteroffer. A report from Fox Sports stated that Smith requested a trade Thursday. So that's pretty different, right? Like, that's not we're trying to push Geno out. That's a market. That's probably the offer he's going to end up signing with the Raiders.
Right. That's wild to me. I missed those numbers, because my prediction was they're going to tack on 2 years, $82 million. That was my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Geno would take that. That would be like a slight, in terms of by percentage of the cap, that would have been a slight pay raise. So for Geno not to take that offer, that sounds like maybe maybe he did want out, or he said, I'm only staying at a certain number here, which I know you won't pay. So by the sounds of it, it sounds like this was really unexpected from Seattle's side.
Not only that, but the timing. Thursday is when he requested a trade. That's the day after DK Metcalf's trade request became public. Could be related to that. And I think the one of the other parts of the intrigue, we'll never know the answer to all these things, right, Griff? But
Right.
if Pete Carroll didn't get hired by the Raiders, does this even happen? Is there another team out there that would have made the case to trade for Geno Smith?
There probably might have been a team that sniffed around, but I think whoever trades him knows that it's coming with a particular contract framework and number. And I think that Vegas was just a perfect match in that sense. They're willing to, one, value him highly, trade for him, and then pay what Geno wants. So yeah, maybe not. Had Pete not gotten hired, maybe Geno would still be in Seattle for a year or two. I will admit, though, this softens my criticism of John, if that report is true, that they really had every intention of keeping him and negotiating highly with him. It does sound like it might have been Geno driven. I don't know.
Well, don't steal the fun. You were gonna have some fun having some different opinions on John Schneider. Although we're both pretty friendly, so it probably won't get too intense. But I look at that, or I listen to that, and I think everyone's like, "Hey, the combine is where all the GMs go to talk with the agents." And like you think about your own GM, Geno's agents are having those conversations as well. And so Geno Smith not doing a counteroffer very likely could have been they had conversations with the Raiders. They had an idea what they would offer him. And so they were able to have a little starch in their shorts about negotiations with the Seahawks and hold them kind of hostage. Now, the other thing, just because I love playing these what if space-time continuum, scenarios or multiverse scenarios, if Matt Stafford had been traded to the Raiders, who they wanted, they'd wanted to acquire him. Again, I don't think the Seahawks would have had a market for Geno Smith. And if they did, it wouldn't have been a third round pick. And if they didn't get a third round pick, I think we might be in the same situation we're in with DK Metcalf, where the team's like, we would love to extend you, Geno, but we're not trading you for that. So you're going to play out the final year of your deal, and we'll just deal with that.
Yeah. The Stafford domino is a big one. They could have found themselves in that similar scenario for sure.
Yeah. So in any event, I mean, again, we get to this John Schneider stuff, and I think that if you want to spin it, it's gonna be funny if I'm gonna be critical now, is because I play both sides on this one. You would say, okay, John might have been outmaneuvered here, right? Like John didn't have enough intelligence, not like IQ, but like about what's going on in the league to anticipate this series of events. It seems like they were not expecting Geno Smith to want out, and it seems like maybe they weren't expecting DK Metcalf to want out, although I have some conflicting, information on that as well. So if that's the case, then you're then left in reactive mode. And maybe this was something you should have gotten out in front of either earlier, whether it's this season or even previous seasons.
Maybe, it's, I've been agnostic on John for a while. Agnostic. So like, I really I think some of the criticism is I guess uncharitable. And then I also think though that I've been wanting a little bit more out of him when it's been within his means to produce more. And I understand that it's also much easier said than done. I don't think he entered the offseason in his mind of losing potentially both his quarterback and star receiver. I think one of the two, he could see, that could happen, and I could be okay with that given the scenario of how it goes down and what I'm getting in return, et cetera. But I don't think that he or Mike McDonald, I don't know about ownership. I don't think any of them went into the 2025, calendar year with like both these guys aren't going to be on the team. I think that they're trying to carry the momentum of the 2024 season, and now they're looking at having to completely re-gear and reset and almost disconnect from what they were before. And that doesn't mean that they can't pivot successfully. I just don't think it was in the cards the way it's gone now. Any of these moves in isolation you can rationalize totally. Like even like the free agent class not going well, which was one of my criticisms, like new team onboarding, like we got to learn each other. Like there is a charitable take. It's just all of these things happening at the same time. I don't really know, like, is it fair? Like, should he have accounted for it? I don't know. Should he have gotten ahead of some of these things? Maybe, maybe not. Losing a head coach and hiring a new one is a disruptive process. It leaves a lot of questions, even if you nail the hire, which he did. It opens you up to a lot of like high variance outcomes. So, yeah.
I think one of the takes I've kind of heard from people is like, hey, did John pull the rug out from under Mike Macdonald and the coaching staff? And or maybe did the Seahawks really were they double speaking? Like, hey, this is just like the Russell Wilson thing where they said we don't intend to trade Russell Wilson. I'll tell you, Griff, even Pete, there was this like wry joy he got from thinking he was like encoding language, and he was kind of like playing with the media and playing with words. That's not Mike Macdonald. When Mike Macdonald goes on multiple different outlets and vociferously, says Geno's gonna be back, can't wait till the extension's done. Right. I literally was like this far away from him when he's talking about that.
Yeah,
he doesn't have that bone in his body. I believe every single thing he said about wanting Geno back, expecting him back, doesn't understand why it's a conversation.
Right.
So I don't think he, one, was misleading. Two, I don't think he would have been that bold without having pretty clear alignment with John that that's what they expected too. So I think this is a pretty big shock to them.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, especially if they're willing to offer that number that they supposedly offered. You don't offer that number. I mean, I would have, if I was John, I would have felt pretty good about that offer sheet, to be honest with you. Like, I thought that's what Geno would have taken. So you also wonder, like, what are the interpersonal relationships like? Is that a variable? I don't have anything there. I'm just saying, like, could that be part of it? And I don't mean it could be like the VMAC has lots of people, lots of different departments. It could be any combination of things there, I don't know. It's an interesting situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had tweeted out and we wanted to talk through this a little bit. You talked about that it had been a rough 15 months for John Schneider. And I'll pull it up because I should have had it up already, but I'll read what you wrote. And, you and I went back and forth a little bit, and I figured we could have that conversation, and there's a lot more to talk about. But what you wrote is been a rough 15 months for John flying solo, made a bad OC hire, bad offensive line again, might end up trading two of your best offensive players, whiffed on the entire free agent class, middling draft, very little has gone to plan. Hiring Mike Macdonald was the only good thing, but even that is getting sandbagged. Say a little bit more on your thoughts there.
Well, yeah, I shouldn't underemphasize how important the Macdonald hire is. That's still the most important thing of all of this, because when coaches slow, fast twitch fibers decrease, they're still as good of a coach, 10 years down the line. So that's still the most important thing. As it relates to maximizing this immediate window, though, I don't think he has done the best job of that. I think it's been improvements here, regression there, and it's just all adding up to the same thing. Again, on a case-by-case basis, you can throw together a rationale for all of that. And like, is it really his fault? Could he have foreseen this or that? And I get it. I just, the decisions made within that 15-month window, many of them have not borne fruit. And I think a lot of, that doesn't mean the decisions made prior to that still aren't, yielding positive gains, which we clearly saw, as you mentioned in your follow-up tweet, like JSN is blossoming. The Julian Love contract, which was made in that 15-month window, that obviously has worked out. Maybe that's tied into the Mike McDonald hire, right? It's just if you're talking about stagnation, which was his word choice, and wanting to springboard positively, I don't think he's done his part in getting there. I think he's helped maintain the floor to a degree, but every year there are 8, 9, 10 win teams that make a big jump. And then every year there are 8, 9, 10 win teams that stagnate, 8, 9, 10 win teams that regress to a 5, 6, 7 win team. And I think he's in that middle pack of just keeping the ship afloat. Not a lot of things have to be done to take that plunge. And I think there's just a lot of kind of scuttling that momentum and wanting to peel back a little bit. And it's just those minor moves that really matter. I just don't think he's nailing them. That's not to say there aren't good things, but again, it's just a lot of like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And yeah, so, and also in a conference that is weak. And I don't think I think the NFC is only going to get stronger. It's still in its weak phase, and I don't think he's exploiting that right now in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to happen for you to be able to take advantage of, a weak conference. And I guess, this whole thing isn't going to just be about the John Schneider piece, because I want to talk to you about Sam Darnold. I want to talk to you about free agency and those things. But let's take a moment here. So I guess the way I look at this, and folks that have listened to the show know I've been pretty critical of John as well, especially on the offensive line, not just recently, but for the last decade. That the thesis for why Pete Carroll was let go was, that there's talent that was better than what the performance was on the field. And the way I see it is that feels like that's been proven out, basically. Like the defense, especially where there's a lot of young talent, had been spiraling on almost any metric for years and became pretty close to a top 10 unit, and almost every single metric made a big jump, as well as, Kobe Bryant's a better position player than he was. They get Josh Jobe, and he is a good signing and fits in. You get best year from Leonard Williams that you've had for a long time. You get, Boye Mafi, Derek Hall has a big step forward. You get a number of these things, Tyrese Knight, that take steps forward, and you end up winning one more game, and we can debate, that game and all that. I don't really care about the one more game or not, but it feels to me that if there's one thing different, everyone's going to talk about all the offensive line moves and all the other moves. If there was one thing different, if they had hired a different offensive coordinator, they might have won 12 games last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's kind of, I think that speaks to, in a way, that's a tacit defense of John, because it speaks to what the raw potential of the core that he has. And it feels like it's not being capitalized on. That jump to, the common refrain is, like, you really think you can do X, Y, and Z with Geno Smith? And it's like, yes, you can. Because yes. look what, if people talk about red zone or whatever, it's just like, you can reduce this down to 2 categories: play action and not play action. The non-play action is elite. The play action plummeted. Theoretically, an offensive coordinator like Kubiak what is he known for? Play action. Geno will take care of the other side of it. Everything will rise to the top. What helps a red zone offense? Play action. So it's like all these, what helps a red zone offense? A run game. What is Kubiak? So it's like one snap, one stroke of the pen, you could be right in there with maybe the second tier NFC teams. I mean, the Eagles look tough right now because they're so well rounded, but you can go toe to toe with the Lions, the 49ers with Kubiak, and you get a guard. So it's like John gets 80% of where he wants to go, and then instead of being uber aggressive for that final 20%, he scales it back because he's worried about what's year 3 and year 4 of my current model window model. And but
Wait, what
there's
do you mean by that? Just
well,
give me an
well,
example of what you're saying.
I guess I think that John is constantly thinking of like, what's my 3 or 4 year window outlook right
Yeah,
now?
sure.
And he doesn't want to make interim moves at the expense of year 3 and year 4. But I don't think it's impossible to make, quote unquote, win now moves. You can do that without it coming at the expense of what's coming down the pipeline. It's been within his grasp. I don't think his rostering strategy is bad per se. I just don't think he's making the right moves here and there. And they don't need to be radical. They don't. Like we've talked about this, like you can't force Kevin Zeitler to sign here. You can't force him to. He has to agree to, right?
100%. We talked about that on the show quite a bit.
Right. So like the whole, Seattle is South Alaska thing, that weighs on the mind.
It is real.
It weighs on the mind of free agents. So like that's where I try to be a little more charitable with John. But it's just like opportunities are there. And I just like the iron is hot and they're not striking. That doesn't mean like it's all bad though. Like I think John again knows what he's doing, but there's just been missed opportunities, I guess. And it's been like the conversation of a long term. But if you keep saying that every single year for 5-6 years, you start to sound like the Mariners. So
what I don't want to keep hammer on this, but I'm curious. You say missed opportunity. What's an example of a missed opportunity in your mind?
Well, I mean, kind of to your point about the OC hire. I mean, the Grubb hire was a fun concept. I get the motivation behind it. Mm-hmm. Had they made the right hire, like you said, they might have won 12 games. Had they had Christian Haynes worked out, have had you know what I'm saying? It's just those types of things.
That's one of the things. I point out the OC hire, and I look at that. And I'm like, all right, let's actually objectively rewind to that period. Mike Macdonald was one of the second to last coach hired. Was a young coach, first time head coach. Does not have a whole network of coaches to bring aboard, and I'm like, who was really in the running? They wanted Mike Kafka. He was blocked by the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
They had talked to I think Frank Smith, who declined, from what I understand, and wanted to go back to Miami. Now has expressed regret about that decision. And so, this is one of those things where I'm like, yeah, that didn't work out. Was it a bad decision? Was there an opportunity? Was there truly an opportunity cost that they could have gone after that they didn't? That was a logical thing to do. And I'm kind of like, I'm not sure that there was this like obvious thing that they should have done that they didn't do. And then everybody loves to talk about the free agent swings and misses. Like that's the number one thing I hear about John Schneider recently. And I think that is, I think that is a really naive way to evaluate. I guess naive is a little too judgmental. I think it is a superficial way to evaluate how that's going on. They had not worked with this coaching staff. They were getting familiar, and they were basically that's what a personnel department independent of being attached to a coaching staff looks like. And if you then fast forward to when they actually had time together and you look at the moves they made during the season,
mm-hmm.
Pretty much every move they made during the season was a step forward and felt like there was a good meshing between coach and GM. So all this is going to be tested tomorrow when they start, getting back into free agency. And if they do a bunch of crap free agent signings and none of them are with the team a year later, again, that there's no excuse. Like there's no explanation. But I personally feel like the amount of flogging that happens for last year's free agent class, in a lot of ways, I wouldn't say I have the opposite perspective, but I think they made a lot of wise, non-committal decisions, 1-year deals with linebackers that they weren't sure were going to work out. Imagine if they had signed Jerome Baker to a 3-year deal, if they signed to the Jordan Brooks deal, how much more critical we would be of that than the fact that they made a deal that they could get out of and upgrade to get to actually what Mike Macdonald wants at the position.
Yeah, that is a good silver lining behind the free agent class, the 1-year deals. Yeah, no, I see your point there.
And I mean, even Rayshon Jenkins, they signed him a 2-year deal. There's no, real dead money from that, and they're out of that. So, you know, I don't want, like, I see David Lombardi, who's not my favorite reporter out there, celebrating how the 49ers got out of the Javon Hargrave and how much money it saves. Dude, they signed him to a $23 million a year deal and it blew up in their faces. You don't
Yeah.
celebrate the cap savings on the other side of it. Like, that's a bad signing. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think there's at least a little bit of multiple sides to that. So let's talk a little bit about let's talk about the DK thing, and then we'll talk about Sam Darnold.
Okay.
Griff, as it stands right now, latest reports, Josina Anderson said that there's a team that she talked to still says that they're not willing to go above a third for DK. The Seahawks now, it's I think Diana Rossini comes out this morning, who had initially reported they were asking for a first and a third that everybody laughed at. Now they're looking for a second. Um, and that seems to indicate to me the Seahawks are not getting anywhere close to the market they hoped for. And if I had to bet right now, I think DK Metcalf's a Seahawk. Like, I don't
Yeah.
see them trading DK Metcalf for a third round pick. Do you?
Not for a third, but I think yes for a second. And
Uh huh.
there's simply waiting on that. And I think some team will cough up a second. Um, Look, I don't. My confidence about keeping DK was low under the assumption Geno was getting extended. Now that Geno's been traded, my confidence went up that DK was going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
But now with the reports that have come out, and that to me just suggests those conversations are still live, even if nothing's imminent. The conversations are still happening. I thought the Geno move would slow down those conversations, but it seems like it's either going at the same rate that it was or it's sped up. And I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like when that happens, when more and more tweets and reports start coming out from the big national names, usually it amounts to something happening. Now, on the flip side, the same thing happened with Stafford and nothing happened. So I don't know. Um, I don't know. Part of me wonders, is DK out for his own reasons? Is he like, I don't want to be here for his own
Mm-hmm.
reasons? Headed into, I mean, my whole thing, I think John wants to keep DK, but he's really strict about whatever number he wants to keep him at. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a Frank Clark situation where he's just, look, I value you at this figure. I will pay you at this figure, no doubt, but I'm not going to go over it on principle for whatever self-imposed budget constraint reasons they have. Um, just sticking to their principles. I think, was it John had a quote like, if you build your whole boat out of exceptions, then you don't really have principles, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's just that notion being tested. And I don't think they would trade DK for a lot of the reasons that people think. I don't care about the penalties. Yeah, they're annoying
Yeah.
at times, but
No.
I mean, he didn't even have that many anyway. So I think it's purely contract, but I wonder, like, is DK driving a lot of this? I think John's been trying to, I think John foresaw this happening. And so he's been maybe manufacturing that trade market for him for a long time as a resort, as a backup plan. And I think that's good GMing. I think that's wise to do that as a, just in case thing. And that's kind of like this is why you do that, because you might have to trade him. If I had to guess, I don't know. My hunch is telling me that he's traded.
Yeah. I'll say this. It has felt to me like DK has not wanted to be here for a little while. Like, um, now that could be misinterpreting body language, speech, all that other stuff, but it doesn't seem like he's been super bought in to what's been going on. And if that's the case, you're trying to build a young team. You're trying to build with a new coach. You're trying to really get everybody bought into a physical style of play, hard nose that isn't always going to be high volume passing. And you just have to wonder if that's it. Are the Seahawks? Let me ask you this way, Griff. At what point are the Seahawks better off keeping him? Like, what's the compensation? Like, what's the compensation they have to get in your mind in order to feel like it's worth trading him versus, you know what? At that point, you just keep him.
I think they'll stomach a second round pick and then something additional, whether that's a receiver who can soak up targets right away, or maybe like an additional fourth round pick or something.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ideal for John, but I think a second round pick, he'll go, okay, fine.
I think that's right as well, and I think it ends up hopefully Seahawks will probably have to include a pick as well. There'll probably be a pick swap with the second pick to get that up as high in the board as possible.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I can imagine like a fourth that becomes a third, in a trade back, like essentially something like that.
right.
But this idea that they're going to trade him for, I said this last night on Twitter, and I think I still believe it. If you trade DK Metcalf for a third round pick, I I think that's pretty close to a fireable offense. Like I think that level of talent, you are better off keeping him in on your roster
Hmm.
and winning and seeing if with your new quarterback and your new OC, maybe things change and maybe you get him signed to an extension during the season, or maybe during the season before there was a bunch of offers for Brandon Ayuk after the draft. Like you could
Hmm.
let this play out, but I don't know, man. Third round pick seems
If if
way
it's
low.
agreed. If it's a third round pick, I think that only happens if the situation got really bad between
Hmm.
Seahawks and DK's camp. I feel like that would have to be like new things occurring that have not occurred yet to get to that point. I agree. Like I think John just needs to come out the winning side of this, whether that's getting DK at his figure or turning him into other resources. Um, Third round pick would not satisfy that. I mean, a second round pick feels like a compromise as is. And it's realistic. Like you weren't going to get a first round pick with the way the trade market is right now, and him being due is the contract that he's going to probably end up getting from someone. Um, but I feel like a second round pick feels right just in terms of what's realistic. But yeah, third round pick that would not be great. That would not play well in the headlines either.
No, no. Well, I want to talk about replacing Geno Smith, and we'll talk about those options here in a second. Sam Darnold being the seems like the very strong leader in the clubhouse. But you mentioned like maybe getting a receiver back in the trade for DK Metcalf, and there's some information that they are looking for that. But could they potentially go for another position? Are there any quarterbacks that you think
Hmm.
might make sense to come back in a trade along with a second round pick?
Well, I feel like you'd be looking at a young quarterback, right, that is
Hmm.
struggling. And there's probably three that come to mind that I can think of. Anthony Richardson's probably the big one. You got Joe Milton. It's Joe, right? Joe
There's
Milton.
Joe.
Yeah, in New England. And then this is another one that people are going to get on my case about. But Spencer Rattler in New
Hmm.
Orleans. And all three of those guys are talented. I think when it comes to the kind of like the coach's pet aspect of playing the position, Rattler is way ahead of those two when it comes to the operational stuff pre-snap. Like how firm are you in the pocket? Do you have happy feet? Can you read defenses? Can you read defender techniques and stuff? Rattler's pretty advanced. I think his issues are like he's the wrong kind of brave at the wrong time type of thing. And then also, even though he's a pocket quarterback, being 6 foot flat, you're not 6'3", and that matters. And there are times when he's trying, like credit to him, trying to play quarterback, but he can't see it because he literally cannot see it. He's trying to work back to a sight line, and then he throws a pass he shouldn't, or his arm can't get a throw off with the pocket constricting on him. That's something that happens to Baker at times. Really, the only guy in history who's really made that work at a high level is Drew Brees, and he's kind of have to think of him as an anomaly, I think. But I really appreciate Rattler's game. His numbers were awful, don't get me wrong. But it would be the Kubiak connection. You're talking about like, hey, you're not betting on anything happening. So if you could, back up, if it doesn't work out, then okay, who cares? But it would be one of those quarterbacks in addition with draft capital just to see what's there. But if the Seahawks trade for Rattler, you don't do that without Kubiak's input. So
Hmm.
it would be affirmation, like, hey, at least he can be our backup at minimum. But yeah, probably those three will come to mind.
Yeah, people are gonna think that I planted the Joe Milton seed in your head because I've been talking about Joe Milton. I'm probably more bullish on that than anyone else. Why? Why Joe Milton? Why is he even in the list when
Well,
so many
he's
people think he's not worth?
he's talented. He's got an arm. He can create a little bit. It's the with the Kubiak Shanahan tree. There's a degree of like if you have traits, anything's possible type thing with your
Mm-hmm.
quarterback. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just a flyer, right? But
Exactly.
if not Milton, then who? You know,
Right.
like who else is out there?
Hendon Hooker would be another one.
Yeah, and
For the
he's one that I personally would probably say no to.
yeah.
I don't think he stylistically fits what they're trying to be. So
Well, so with that kind of set aside, I assume I'm going to assume, and you tell me if I'm wrong. We're in agreement that the right way to attack filling this quarterback hole that you've created is to sign a guy, a veteran that you know can play the position, and then add a young guy, and have those two guys battle it out with Sam Howell and Jaron Hall or whoever in training camp, and you see what comes out the other side. Are we in alignment there?
yeah, I mean, if you're trying to win as many games as you can and you're trying to get to the playoffs, then it's probably pointing in one direction, right?
So if that's the case, let's talk about those two potential names. We don't have to go into the trade options we just talked about, but let's say free agency is the first one and you sign the vet. Who for you is top of your list?
Darnold to me feels like best available, and who's the second one? I'm blanking in
Who's
terms
the
of
second?
free.
Oh, meaning we're gonna get a vet and we're gonna get a rookie. So we'll talk about
Oh, okay,
we'll talk about some of the draft picks in a second.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it would have to be Darnold. Otherwise, you're looking at Fields, Russ, um, Rogers. That's right,
Mm-hmm.
Rogers. And I don't think
Cousins, maybe.
now Cousins is actually interesting to me because you'd be getting him on the same deal the Steelers got Russ, probably $1 million deal. Cousins another year removed from recovering from that injury. Can he gain back some mobility? You'd find out in training camp right away, if he can or can't. Hell, you can sign Darnold and Kirk and let them have a camp battle if you want, because Kirk
Mm-hmm.
will be $1 million in all
Mm-hmm.
likelihood. Um, gun to my head, I'm going with Darnold probably if
Mm-hmm.
you're really trying to win as much as you can.
So the Darnold piece, I mean, I've seen a bunch of stuff kind of come out with Darnold, and specifically like, hey, he maybe isn't as good under pressure. And I know you had a tweet about this, but you're not alone. A lot of folks have been talking about this, and I've also seen people talk about, well, the Vikings had a way better offensive line, and I've been looking at this, and you know, at least by pass blocking efficiency, the Vikings had the 30th ranked pass blocking offensive line in the NFL last year. The Seahawks had the 32nd. Passing under pressure, and this is for if I look over the whole season. Let me just look at the whole season here. Um, and I look at how did people perform passing under pressure? And this is well, let's not look at blitz. Look at pressure. Okay, Sam Darnold was 7th in the NFL in passing grade when under pressure. Geno Smith was 8th, and he also had an offensive line that lost Christian Darrisaw after 7 games, and then had an interior that was pretty bad. And if I look at like the last, like from Darrisaw's injury on weeks 8 through 18, um, somehow, uh, Sam Darnold was, he was under pressure 37% of the time. Geno Smith was under pressure 38% of the time. So it wasn't, after they, like for a lot of the season, he was under a pretty similar pressure rate to what Geno was under.
Mhm.
And the last thing I'll kind of throw out is I think Darnold puts the ball in harm's way quite a bit. But if I look at turnover worthy plays when under pressure, there's a bunch of ways to look at this. Um, you know, Geno Smith had a 6.2% turnover worthy play rate when under pressure last year. This is over those last weeks 8 to 18, I should say as well. Sam Darnold was. I'm looking. Where is he? I must be missing him. Oh, there he is. So Geno Smith was 6.2%. Sam Darnold was 3.8%. This is under pressure from weeks 8 to 18 on. So I guess, Griff, I'm just kind of curious,
Yeah.
are we sure we have the narrative right on who he is?
So I watched some more tape and I looked at some more numbers myself, and I think it's yes and no on to answer that question. Pressure's a weird stat because, and I've been using it to not be hypocritical here, but quarterbacks can control their pressure, right, to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And typically when you have pocket-oriented quarterbacks and they have a high pressure rate, you can point a little bit more toward the offensive line than you can otherwise. Darnold is a pocket quarterback, but in that case, there's pressure you can see and then pressure you can't see. For a quarterback, pressure you know that's coming, pressure that you don't know that's coming. Darnold's relationship to pressure that he understands is actually, because that's where his athleticism comes into play, his pocket athleticism. He can manage pressure that he can see, and he can still understand the picture downfield. Pressure that he's not expecting, and then this is also where phantom pressure comes in when he doesn't get pressure. That's when his process starts to break down on tape. That's what I see. So over the course of this past season, he didn't regress. He got exposed, in my view. Teams figured him out. And that doesn't mean every game he's going to take 13 sacks, right? Like he did against the Rams or whatever, where it was truly abysmal. Not all of it was on him. But his relationship to kind of that gray area of where the pocket isn't perfect, but it can still be worked, compared to Geno, you're talking, man, like Geno's at the top when it comes to managing manageable pressure. Darnold he gets thrown out of whack. He stops seeing things downfield. He'll drop his eyes, or he'll reset in the pocket when he doesn't need to. He starts to get nervous. And I also believe, though, because he is talented, and he really did make a huge jump this year as an operator, and he showed stuff he's never shown before. And he can also just get intrinsically better. He's 27. He can totally develop now. They might have unlocked a development curve that he previously was not able to access, especially with Kubiak, who's coached him before and coaches quarterbacks the same way Kevin O'Connell does. I don't know, though, that if I was Sam's agent, I would say, outside of Kubiak, Seattle's not a fit for you. You might be the best fit or Seattle might view you as the best fit for them, but I don't think they're the best fit for you right now. I would try to go somewhere else where they can help you out a little bit more. If I was Darnold's agent, I would say go to Pittsburgh personally. I think that's the best spot for him in terms of combination of things. Also, the receivers helped out a ton. But he also made decisions knowing they can help him out. So it's not like he would make certain throws to Justin Jefferson that he would make to DK. DK is a very good receiver, but you would use DK as a release valve in different ways than you would use Jefferson. Jefferson, you can throw it anywhere near him. He's either going to high point it or separate for it. There's so much assumption. DK isn't that kind of good receiver, right? The connection with Jackson Smith and Jigba would be totally fine. I guess what I'm saying is I don't believe you would be able to lift his Minnesota season and translate that to Seattle 1-to-1. I think Kubiak would put more effort into protecting him, even more than O'Connell did, and they would run way more, and the dropback game would not be very expansive, which is kind of what it would essentially be the Derek Carr offense, note for note. And then would Sam be able to out execute Carr? And maybe he could, maybe he couldn't in that exact same scenario. Carr's numbers were actually pretty good, as we've talked about. And again, I think that was Kubiak doing the heavy lifting. But so with Darnold, I'm not opposed to it at all. I know I'm ranting here. It could work.
This is good. This is what we want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it could work. That's my view. I think it would be a considerable downgrade from Geno, though. All things equal.
Well, so if that's the case, I mean, we're also talking about not just Geno, we're talking about the offense. And can the offense step forward? Is it going to be just as bad or worse?
Right.
And obviously, we need to find out what they do on the offensive line. And then we need to find out how this scheme looks and how the running game looks. You could get maybe more out of Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh than you did last year. You could potentially get more out of the tight end position than you got last year. And maybe you take a step back in some of your, like some of the aspects of your passing game. Is there a path here with Darnold where the offense can still be better than it was last year, even if he's not the same quarterback that Geno Smith is?
Yeah. I mean, if your O line, shapes up, right? If you can create the conditions, if you can recreate the conditions that Minnesota created, which it's not impossible to do that. If you can create that here, then yeah, it's possible that Darnold can. I mean, look, Darnold has an arm. If you can turn this into a point and shoot situation, you can protect him so that you don't have to. You can preempt his, say, negative, undesirable traits in the pocket. Then yeah, you can go do all sorts of things with him. It's the same theory of like all sorts of quarterbacks kind of in my opinion, like that 14 to 18 range. If you produce enough positive things around them, then yeah, like the 18th best quarterback in the National Football League in an absolute sense is very good at playing quarterback. If you can give the 18th best quarterback in the league X, Y, and Z, you can go far with them because we've seen that happen. He's way different than Jimmy G stylistically, but Jimmy G went to a Super Bowl and he made plays, and Kyle Shanahan created the conditions for it. So you have to be open to the possibility of it. Yeah.
Well, and I want to come back to you on that ranking thing for a second, but Sam Darnold, just for what it's worth, had the fifth highest play action passer grade in the NFL last year among quarterbacks. Geno Smith was 25th, and I don't think that's just about the player. It's about the conditions they're in and the coaching and all that kind of stuff, the play calling. But in that regard, at least, there seems like a good match between Kubiak. And by the way, number 2 graded play action passer in the NFL last year, Derek Carr. So I do think there's an interesting match potentially there. Griff, quickly there, you mentioned ranking. And I know you have Geno at around the 8th best quarterback in the NFL. Where would you put Darnold, roughly?
If you could only go off of last year, you're not making any projections, just just trying to describe what has happened to this point. I would throw him in the rough tier of quarterbacks of like Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, maybe Kyler Murray. I kind of view quarterbacks of like what their skill sets are and not like what they've accomplished, so kind of like maybe how a scout would, like if all the quarterbacks were in a vacuum and I could take them for one season only and I have no idea what the rest of my team is like, he would probably be the 14th or 15th or 16th quarterback I would take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems totally fair to me. So let's talk about rookies. Let's talk about rookies, any of them that have caught your attention. And let me ask it this way, Griff. Is there any rookie quarterback in this class that if they called their name at 18, you would feel good about it?
Cam Ward.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be there.
You and I are in the same boat then. That's exactly where I'm at.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then let's say that they're able to pry the Patriots' second round pick away. It's like in the late 30s or something like that.
I mean, look.
Who do you want to hear? Who do you want to hear them call?
Who do I want to? I could personally. I look. I've not watched them enough because I did not think I was going to need to take the quarterback class seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Probably McCord or Dart, just for the hell of it, because he definitely has the most traits in that range.
Yeah.
I think Dart though is like a 3-4 year project though, man. Like he's not going to have a Brock Purdy season year one. as a rookie. He needs time. Like, it's to defend Dart. Like, he needs breathing room. Like, do not thrust him into a situation like that yet. Give him a chance to develop skills that his college coach did not even ask him to develop. Like, so.
Have you watched any Tyler Shuck yet?
I haven't. I know a lot of people are intrigued by him, though.
I would love for you to watch him. We'll talk after you do.
Okay.
I feel like he's the most ready. He's a little bit older, and people freak out about that, but I don't really care. Like, whatever. I think Dart, to me, the thing that stood out to Dart to me is, one, I mean, he's got the aura of a starting quarterback, and people can like give a sideward glance to that, but it matters. It absolutely matters. Like, talk about a position that's under a lot of pressure and that you got to lead a lot of men through a lot of tough situations. You've got to be able to have someone who's got those qualities. He's got it. Unfortunately for me, I've been a Kyle McCord guy. I did not get that feel from him when I was watching him at the combine and watching him interact, but I love his tape, man. That guy layers throws. He hits hole shots. Like, he makes some NFL throws. So I totally get where you're coming from there. But the guy that I'm really concerned about, Quinn Ewers, whose agent happens to be good buddies with John Schneider and Byron Murphy's agent. And like, there's been these like murmurs about Ewers and the Seahawks. It would be a tough one for me if that's the pick. I'm not sure I believe in him becoming a good quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, if you want to take him late and just have him on your bench and see what he can do in camp, like, I'm not diametrically opposed to it, but yeah, I'm with you on that. Not to change the subject, and this just popped into my head. When we talked about young quarterbacks that are out that they could trade for, there's one name that we didn't mention that.
Yeah.
I think that I'm saying this because I think we need to have him on our mind, not because we want him, but because the combination of John and Kubiak might be interested in him, and that's Will Levis. And the reason for that, because his college scheme in Kentucky, they run the McVay scheme, note for note. That's what, I mean, there was rumor that Arthur Smith liked him. That's what Arthur Smith was doing with Tannehill. The whole thing about Will Levis is like, could you turn him into Ryan Tannehill? Even for a couple of years. And I think Kubiak wouldn't be opposed to that. And John, he likes arms. He can throw the ball, if nothing else. He'll stand in the pocket and throw the ball. Maybe not to the right person, but I think we just need to keep him in the back of our mind where like a tweet might roll through. Will Levis for a 6th round pick, So I don't know. I would just keep him in mind. That's a
good one, and one I keep I remember when I'm off camera, but then I forget to mention it on. I think that's a fair one to bring up. All right, Griff. Let's talk about free agency briefly. Who are you hoping that they call that like all of a sudden is announced as a Seahawk tomorrow?
I mean, Dahlman makes a lot of sense, right? I think he's a little overrated. I don't think he's that good. He's certainly good. He's certainly a quantum leap above what they've had. I like Oluwatimi, but if they like Dahlman, I trust Benton and I trust the offensive staff. Is it Will Fries?
Yeah, Will Fries. Yeah.
Yeah, Will Fries. Okay, so I would be in on that as well. Beyond that, I don't know really viable options. I'd be curious to know what you think, but at interior offensive line, it'd be one of those two.
Yeah. Those are definitely the names Jeff and I talked about yesterday. I mean, there's maybe a couple more that are somewhat interesting, but none of them that would be particularly encouraging, I would say. And I mean, Mekhi Becton's a big name, but I think not sure that he's a perfect fit for what they're trying to do. And then it gets into some other positions where, like, they do have an opening at safety. Is Talanoa Hufanga a guy that makes his way to Seattle? And would that be an interesting, 1-year flyer and a former All-Pro player that's still very young? And then also, are there? I'm curious. Like, Trey Hendrickson's a guy. He's not a free agent, but is available right now to be exploring trades. Are you interested in him at all? Like where are you at on their pass rush and where it stands?
Well, Hendrickson's really good. I'm satisfied with the edge group. Even if Mafe doesn't take another jump, the combination of him, Nwosu, and Derek Hall, like, I'm okay with. That's fine for me. If they want a absolute stud there, then okay, fine. Like I'm not opposed to it, but I don't really D-line in general. I'm just not thinking about a position, or D-line in general is not a position group that I'm really worried about. If there's a guy in the draft they love, then okay, yeah, fine. But the thing is, there aren't very many snaps available. So someone's going to not be played enough, or a young player's development will be curved negatively. So Hendrickson's a great player, though.
Before I let you go, a couple super chats that I think are worth us talking about together. One from Trevor Roten, who said, "Why do people think Darnold's going to be cheap? The Titans think he's going to be expensive." And then Long Live the King says, "If Darnold's price is lower than Geno's and he's younger, why didn't the Raiders aim for Darnold if they were truly interested?" So this is about the two things I want to kind of mesh here, which is the price for Darnold. How much do you care what the price is? And then two, I do think it validates this notion that Geno's a better quarterback than Darnold, when the Raiders could have just signed Darnold to probably a cheaper deal than what they're going to sign Geno to, a younger player, and not given up a third-round pick, and they chose to not do that. Like, I think that tells you all you need to know.
Yeah.
But, like, how much do you think, like, at what point do you care how much Darnold is paid?
Well, you don't want it to, I guess you want there to be a silver lining to moving on from Geno. That is, okay, now you have even more cap space to go do fun stuff with, right? Mm-hmm. So if whatever Darnold's cap hit is this year, plus the dead cap hit you're paying Geno, which you're still on the hook for, even if they extend Geno, right, in Vegas.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It might end up equaling something along the lines of what they were going to pay Geno anyway. So they'd be paying the quarterback position the same amount of cap dollars to mildly downgrade or significantly downgrade, depending on how you feel about it. So,
there's this other narrative out there that I just want to pierce, which is like, they better use this cap space that they have to now address the offensive line. They've had the cap space to address the offensive line. Extending Geno would have created $23 million. Like, signing Sam Darnold to a $35 or even a $40 million a year deal will not keep them from having the cap space this year to sign an offensive lineman. Like, cap space is not going to be the problem here. It's just not. And so I think the problem could be, does Drew Ballman want to come here? Is there so much competition that his price is all of a sudden $25 million a year for a above average center? Like, that's where there could be problems. But, there's a certain point where you just don't want to spend 75% more than their actual value in a contract.
Right.
That's just about good operation for your team. So, just wanted to bring that up to people. I think people, like, they might see 35 million for Sam Darnold or 40 million. I don't think it'll get that high, but maybe, who knows? And think, oh my God, they've really blown it. They still are going to have plenty of money, because a lot of that money is going to be pushed into future years. So, Griff, I know I've kept you longer. Anything else you wanted to cover before I let you go?
Not that I can, not off the top of the dome anyway.
Dude, it's been great having you, as always. And make sure people check out Seattle Overload with Griff and Maddie. I know Maddie seems like he's going through it, man. It seems like this is a rough period, man. Send him our best.
Maddie will be okay. He's a tough lad. He'll be fine.
Okay. All right. That was Griff Sturgeon. Thank you so much for coming on. Follow him at CMike's Spin Move on Twitter and other places. And make sure you check out the Seattle Overload podcast as well. Let me go through some of these super chats. We've got Chris Clark, who has gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. Really appreciate you, Chris. We've got Jeff Jennings saying, Raiders used to try to kill the opposing team, full stop. Lyle Alzado and others. Yep. They were a very different franchise back then, and that aura has stuck with them even after they've been a awful team for a while. Shiv says, release the Schneider cult. Just wanted to say it. Okay. Ed Chan comes in with just something for my fave. The earth might be falling, but let's be cool with it. Pod lineup. Cheers, fellas. Go Hawks. Well, thank you, Ed. Appreciate you, man. Rick R is back with 5 free Hawk Blogger memberships. You can get one of these free memberships. All you got to do, click like, subscribe to the channel, watch the shows. The more you watch, the more you engage, the bigger chance you have to win one of these free memberships. YouTube decides who gets them. Make sure you have gifting turned on for your account in order to be qualified to get one. Zachary says, do you think sports radio like Mike Salk, Hugh Millen, and fans played a big part in driving Geno out? I don't think so. I would say that sports radio is generally a reflection of fans and the conversations. Like sports radio is going to focus on conversations that drive engagement and drive people to listen. And the fact of the matter is that I think there's a lot of people that felt the way that Mike Salk feels about Geno Smith. Like, maybe a good player, maybe not like the guy you want on your team. Like, it's not just those guys. I think they're just a reflection of the larger community's perspective on him, and they just have a bigger microphone, a bigger amplification of their message. So I think you just hear it a little bit more. I do think, for what it's worth, I do think Geno's popularity or lack thereof is somewhat of a factor. But keep in mind, that is Geno's call. And I got to say, like, if you look at Raiders fans' reactions to the rumor, there was a rumor that Geno was going to go to the Raiders before the trade. They were like, absolutely not. We don't want to bring mediocrity here. Like, they were 100% against it. So this is not just a Seattle thing. This is an entire NFL thing. And it's why I said at the beginning, I think if Pete Carroll wasn't hired in Vegas, and if Matt Stafford was traded to LA, or to the Raiders, if either one of those things, if Pete Carroll had not been hired or Matt Stafford had been traded, either one of those things had happened, Geno Smith would probably still be a Seahawk, because I don't think there was other market for him. Detail Oriented says, my 2 cents, Brian. DK's freakish talent and athleticism are undeniable, but I think his production can be replaced with cheaper options. In my opinion, his output hasn't matched his talent or size advantage. I don't think that's just an opinion. I think that's a fact. I think that's an absolute fact. And that doesn't change the reality that if John Schneider lets him go for less than a second, you're doing the Seahawks dirty. Like, you just can't do that. You are better off having a disgruntled DK Metcalf catching, 1,000+ yards of passes for you next year, and like keeping fans engaged, keeping your team winning, and figuring out if something can be worked out either with him or on a trade, than trading him for a 3rd-round pick. You just cannot do that. And if he does, I'm going to be on here saying the exact same thing, that it's an awful, awful deal if that's what they do. All right. Ravens Bolt says, Darnold is the guy who admitted to seeing ghosts. Yeah, that last game against the Rams was atrocious. Darnold was terrible in that game. Now, there's video you can go find of Dan Orlovsky giving a full-throated defense of Sam Darnold and the sacks that he took, and how many of them were, poorly schemed protections where he had no chance to make a different decision, or poorly schemed plays where Kevin O'Connell was just out-coached and Sam Darnold had nowhere to go with it. I listened to that at the time, and I was like, I get you, Orlovsky, and I think there's some goodness in there, but I watched that game, and Sam Darnold was holding onto the ball for ages. It was not good. And there was opportunities for him to make a lot of different decisions, even throwing the ball away, and he didn't. And he took some huge sacks, turnovers, all this stuff. So I don't think you can explain away that game. That was a awful, awful game. So I still don't think that that's like necessarily a reason to say that he is a bad choice for you to be quarterback, and that you can't be a better offense with him next year than you were without him last year. There's a lot of ifs. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Sam Darnold is a fantastic quarterback. I think Griff's right in the sense that he's like 15, like in the like middle range of quarterbacks in this league. But I think that a well-functioning offense with a good run game can do a hell of a lot for all sorts of quarterbacks. And let's just see. Let's see, first of all, if this even comes to fruition before we start, celebrating or or criticizing. Scott Wallace, been a member for 3 months. Scott, thank you, man. I appreciate our longer term members. Really, really appreciate the support. Says, concerned on signing Ernest Jones. Losing him would be tough. I'm not so concerned. They certainly have the money to do it now. All sides want to get it done. I think it'll get done, but it's probably not John's first concern right now. He's got some other, irons in the fire, so to speak. Giuseppe, Orlando, greetings from Germany. Big fan, Brian. Well, greetings to you, Giuseppe. Great to see you. I love hearing from people all over the world who are tuning into this show. And I think we've got a lot more people tuning in now with all that's going on. So let me just reset things and we'll kind of continue what's going on from here. So today is Sunday. This is the day before legal tampering period opens. Tomorrow it will open. We will start getting actual reports. Now, I believe you will start getting some reports even as early as today. It could come out that some of these things have started to happen, but they won't be officially reported till tomorrow. And then a lot of those deals any of the deals that are reported tomorrow will actually not become official until Wednesday when the league year opens. So there's a lot that's going to happen between now and then. Starting tomorrow, probably around 7 a.m., I will be live, and I will probably be live a lot of the day. There might be times I step away and leave the show running and come back, but we're going to do kind of either a lot of separate shows or maybe a couple marathon shows, and I'll be on here talking about what's going on in free agency, both with the Seahawks and without. I think that there is a window here where the DK Metcalf trade could come to fruition today. And I think that if it doesn't, then you're going to have teams that are going to see what they can get at the wide receiver spot and teams that are going to lose out on the wide receiver spot in free agency. And then you're going to get a window at the end of this week where that first wave of free agency is done. And there's teams that maybe thought they'd get a receiver that don't get that receiver and maybe come back to the table for DK Metcalf. So I think that's another window where the deal could potentially happen if it doesn't happen today. Then there'll be another window right around when at the end of the month, when there's the owners meeting. That is when people will be in person in Florida. And so you'll have an opportunity to have a lot of these in-person conversations. And that's another time where the deal could happen. And the final window where I think the deal could happen is, late April, right before the draft. So I think there's these clear windows where this deal for DK Metcalf could come to fruition. My understanding is that the expectation this deal is going to happen. The Seahawks, I think, intend to make this deal. I don't know if they're going to get the offer that they want. And I think they'd prefer to have it done sooner rather than later because I think they'd like to know going into free agency where they want to spend their money and what cap space they have. This is not a situation where they will trade him no matter what. So there's the potential where they'll have him with his full cap hit on the roster this year, and they'd have to plan differently with that being the case. The other piece here is, they know they want to have it figured out before the draft because they might be emphasizing receiver more in the draft if they lose DK Metcalf as well. So keep an eye out. The news could happen today. It definitely could happen today. We'll keep an eye out on that. With the news about Myles Garrett being extended, he's no longer out there. The news about Ronnie Stanley being re-signed by the Ravens, that's a big domino. There's a number of basically the free agent class has really, really shrunk in terms of who's interesting that's available. And the thing to keep an eye out for is there another team that's in it on Darnold? Because if Sam Darnold says, I'm going elsewhere, honestly, guys, I think this gets real messy. I don't think there is another quarterback truly viable option other than Sam Darnold. And so if he goes elsewhere, Seahawks are they're in a rough spot. They're in a rough spot. I have to think that they made this move with Geno knowing that Darnold was going to come. And things can change and they could get snaked by somebody, but I have some confidence that they wouldn't have made this move with Geno if they didn't know that they had Darnold as an alternative option. Teams do not generally move on from starting quarterbacks without feeling like they've got their next move already ironed out. So, I don't know what to feel about Drew Dalman. I know that I want it to be that the Seahawks get Drew Dalman. If you want me to bet right now, Drew Dalman's going to sign somewhere else for an obscene amount of money. That's my best guess. That there'll be another team, whether it's New England. I don't know if New England's the right team, but there's going to be another team somewhere. Maybe it's the Chargers. Maybe it's the Bears. That's going to offer him money that John Schneider's not willing to offer. That's my guess, is that Drew Dalman will not be a Seahawk. If he is, man, that would be nice. That would be really nice. If he's not, then I think Will Fries becomes your next primary target. I don't think he's going to be cheap either. And if you don't get Will Fries, like, the disaster scenario here is you lose Darnold to someone else. You lose Dalman to someone else. You lose Fries to somewhere else. And then what? You're in a rough spot. You are in a really rough spot. So the next 24 hours is going to be a really important 24 hours for this franchise. And I see people talking about Justin Fields. I'm telling you guys, there is a massive gulf between Justin Fields and Sam Darnold as far as operating an NFL offense. It's not close. It's not close. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. If you haven't already, consider going over to jkboots.com. Use code HawkBlogger. Get the best pair of boots you'll ever own. 10% off using that code HawkBlogger. Also, you get a chance to win a Seahawks-themed pair of boots, and you get to help contribute to charity. We've given away many boots to Northwest Forest firefighters as well as LA firefighters, based on you guys all getting boots that you love. So you get boots you love, you get 10% off, you maybe get a chance to win a Seahawks-themed pair of boots, and you get to help charity. It's a great deal. Make sure you take advantage of it. Until I am back with you tomorrow, this has been another episode 349 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. See you all soon. Take care.